You reap what you sow. This amazing array of young men and women are a sampling of what CUFI on campus is producing. We just told our students, you are supporters of Israel, But it is not the fans in the stands that win the game, it is the players in the field, and we want you to move from supporter to activist. And our CUFI on-campus students are equal to the challenge. The other side is strategic, they are well-funded, and they are active. And these are the people that CUFI on campus are producing. I have never met young men and women of such character and quality as the people I've met in CUFI on campus. The students who were in the room moments ago, right beneath where we are tonight, they are future presidents, policymakers, and pastors. And they were here because of you. You're giving. You have skin in the game. These students have skin in the game. What CUFI on campus is capable of, we can change history, but we cannot do it without your help. I ask you to give to CUFI on campus so that we can produce leaders speaking to power and impacting the future of this country. Thank you so much, and God bless CUFI on campus.
Welcome, everyone. It's Jessica Marzuko with CUFI on campus. Thank you for joining us for the launch of the 2021 Virtual SALT Conference. I want to give a huge shout out to our CUFI on campus students who are watching from across the country. And I also want to extend a very warm welcome to those who are participating in CUFI on campus for the first time. Comment in the thread below and let us know where you're watching from. We have a great opportunity for the students who will attend tomorrow's registration-only content. You'll automatically be invited to a virtual tour of a location in Jerusalem that's happening next month, so check it out. This past year has had its challenges, but it's given CUFI on campus an opportunity to strengthen and dig deeper into the amazing relationships with our students. We've had the privilege to walk by your side through the trials and triumphs of 2020. We've prayed with you, we've encouraged you, we've been encouraged by you, so thank you. Tonight, we're going to take a look at Israel and the college campus. We're also going to take a deeper look at what you, our CUFI on campus activists, have been doing to make an impact in 2020. We'll also have special guests and opportunities to learn more. To kick off tonight, we have Eric Stackelbeck, the host of CUFI's television program, The Watchman. Eric will be walking us through the top 3 news stories of 2020. So let's jump right in. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, and I will hand it to you.
Jessica, thanks so much, and thanks to the entire CUFI on campus family for having me. Hey, I can't be with you in person like I usually would be at the SALT conference, but it's great that we can still gather virtually because we've got a lot to talk about. The Middle East never sleeps, and events happening there right now will affect all of us in 2021. Now, before I get into it, I want to thank everyone who's participating in the SALT conference this year. You are the watchmen and watchwomen on the wall at the most crucial battleground in the United States right now when it comes to the struggle, the fight for Israel, and that is the American college campus. So thank you for your courage, for everything you're doing, and don't underestimate the importance of you being a part of CUFI on campus. You are called here for such a time as this. Your involvement with CUFI on campus is not a coincidence. God chose you to be a part of this movement without a doubt. So be very, very encouraged for the role you have to play in the kingdom. This is a crucial, crucial part of what God is doing in the world right now, and you are in the middle of it. Again, the tip of the spear, so thank you. We need to get into everything that's going on in the Middle East right now. It's interesting because Jessica asked me to review the top 3 Middle East Israel-related stories of 2020. And I'm going to do that, but the great thing about it is they're also the top 3 Israel-related stories for 2021 as well. So this is information that you need to know as ambassadors for Israel on your college campus. This is vital information that you can share because you're not only students at CUFI on campus, you're also educators. So this is important information that you can share in the ideological battles that you will face on campus. Here's what's going on. Most important Israel-related stories right now, top three, in no particular order. Number one, the increase in tensions, the war footing. You have the United States, Israel, and the Sunni Arab nations like Saudi Arabia on one side, and on the other side, you have the Iranian regime and its proxies. They include Hezbollah in Lebanon. That's Iran's most powerful proxy. Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas in Gaza. The various radical Shia militias in Iraq, which are backed by Iran. And then the Houthi rebels in Yemen, also an Iranian proxy. And of course, you have Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian dictator, who is basically a vassal of the Iranian regime. So the battle lines are drawn, and over the past 2 months, we've seen a lot of messages sent by both sides. Let's start with the U.S. and Israel. Over the past 2 months or so, the United States has flown B-52 bombers low over the Persian Gulf in plain sight of Iran to send a message. Number two, both the United States and Israel have sailed submarines into the Persian Gulf and surfaced in the Gulf, again in plain sight of Iran, and that U.S. submarine was nuclear equipped. Third, the United States has an aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, in the Persian Gulf right now, not far from Iran. So why are the United States and Israel sending these messages? Well, you've probably been seeing this in the headlines over the past month and a half or so. Iran continues to threaten serious revenge against the United States for the death of terror kingpin Qasem Soleimani, who was killed last year, if I recall correctly, January 3rd, 2020, as last year's SALT conference was kicking off. So he was killed a little over a year ago. Iran still wants revenge for that. And secondly, on November 27th, 2020, at the end of last year, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the man who's considered the father of Iran's nuclear bomb, he was killed outside of the Iranian capital of Tehran. No one has claimed responsibility for his death, but the Iranian regime is pointing the finger at Israel. And again, like I said, nearly on a daily basis, Iran is making these threats and vowing retaliation against Israel and the United States. So the Israel and the U.S. are saying, hey, don't even think about it, Iran. And that's why you see these shows of force, the B-52 bombers, the aircraft carrier, the submarines from the United States, from Israel, and also verbally. Israel has said, don't even try it to Iran. Israeli officials are saying that on a pretty frequent basis. Another interesting wrinkle here is that Israel just provided the United States with 2 Iron Dome missile defense batteries, which the U.S. will undoubtedly use in Iraq, where these Iranian-backed forces have been targeting the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad on a frequent basis. But I love the collaboration there with Israel providing the United States with Iron Dome missile defense systems. Shows again that great bond between Israel and the United States, and shows that not only do we share common values, but we share a common enemy. Chief among the enemies right now is that Iran axis. So you've got the United States and Israel ramping up on one hand because of those Iranian threats, and on the other side, you've got Iran. In the past few weeks, Iran has unveiled 2 new warships. They've carried out one major drill involving hundreds of Iranian-made drones that are attack drones. They've also carried out some short-range, mid-range, and long-range missile tests, both in the desert and at sea. So Iran also is responding to Israel and the United States. They've also unveiled an underground missile base along the Persian Gulf coastline. So this tit-for-tat situation continues. The Middle East is a tinderbox right now. All sides are on war footing, and you need to know that without a doubt. Number 2, major story, speaking of war footing, and a major wrinkle to this to mention is that obviously we have a new administration here in the United States, and part of Iran's provocative moves are to get leverage, I guess you would say, with the Biden administration. Iran is saying, hey, if you don't kind of come to the table and treat us well, then we'll cause a lot of trouble here in the Middle East. And that brings me to number two, the number two top story of 2020 and 2021. Iran once again driving for a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran announced a little while ago that they will be enriching uranium at a clip of 20%. Not to get too in the weeds with all the technical aspects of Iran's nuclear program, just know this, that it's kind of a hop, skip, and a jump apparently, and I'm not an expert on all the technical aspects of it either, but according to atomic experts and folks that we talked to at CUFI, including a guy named Richard Goldberg, who was the point man at the National Security Council for countering Iran's nuclear weapons program, it's not a large leap to go from 20% enriched uranium to 90% enriched uranium, which would enable you to have a nuclear bomb. So Iran once again ramping up all of its nuclear activity. The interesting thing is the United States pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in May 2018. Rightfully so, in my view. It was disastrous in many ways, but the Biden administration is talking about re-entering that deal. Iran has been enriching uranium already at 12 times the amount allowed under that Iran nuclear deal. So obviously they have not kept up their end of the bargain. Another devastating factor about that Iran deal, which made it such a horrible move, quite frankly, for the United States, is that Iran's ballistic missile program was not mentioned as part of that nuclear deal. And folks, just so you know, Iran has the most robust ballistic missile program in the entire Middle East right now. I mentioned the tests. They're carrying out short-range, mid-range, long-range missiles. So that is something to keep in mind, that in the original incarnation of the Iran deal in July 2015, those missiles were not even mentioned. Imagine that. And not only that, Iran's terror activities across the Middle East were also not mentioned. So this may become the biggest story in 2021, the Biden administration's desire to re-enter the Iran nuclear deal and Iran's threats that if they don't get a favorable deal from the United States, then they're going to enrich uranium at an even more rapid clip and drive even closer to the bomb. But the elephant in the room here, when we're discussing Iran's nuclear program, is that Israel, under no circumstances, will allow Iran to acquire the bomb. Israeli officials in the past 2 weeks alone have been reiterating that under no circumstances will we, meaning Israel, allow Iran to acquire the bomb. It's a non-starter for Israel. A red line has been drawn and Israel sticks to its red lines. So that issue is heating up. That is the biggest issue to watch in 2021. It was also the biggest issue as we closed out 2020. Here's the last one, and we'll end on a positive note here, the Abraham Accords. To me, this was the most exciting story of 2020. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, all coming to the peace table with Israel and forging peace with the Jewish state. Just incredible, that accomplishment. And it's a warm peace so far, especially with Israel and the United Arab Emirates. I personally can't wait to go to the UAE and film for the Watchmen there. It's been a very warm peace. A lot of synergy there between Israel and the UAE, Israeli tourists traveling to the UAE, and likewise citizens of the UAE traveling to Israel. So very exciting to see that. I believe it will continue in 2021. The Trump administration got the ball rolling big time with the Abraham Accords. I think the Biden administration would be wise to build on that. Peace is a good thing when Israel and its Sunni Arab nations can come to the table. So look for Saudi Arabia, look for Oman, even look for nations like Pakistan and Indonesia, which are not in the Middle East, but are obviously influential Muslim nations. Look for talk of these nations coming together with Israel to continue. And the main reasons this is happening, number one, Iran. As we discussed earlier, those lines are drawn, right, with Israel, the United States, and the Sunni Arab nations like the UAE, Bahrain, Jordan, Morocco, Egypt on one side, and Iran and its axis on the other. These Sunni Arab nations are petrified of that looming Iranian superpower in the region, that Shia superpower in the region, which is driving towards a nuclear bomb. They see Israel not only as the strong horse that will respond to Iran, but also as the solution to and not the problem in the region. The number two reason for the Abraham Accords really is that these Sunni Arab nations want to be blessed. Imagine that, the biblical principle, bless Israel and be blessed. They want to be blessed by Israel. By making peace with Israel, they want to be blessed. They want to benefit from Israeli ingenuity, innovation. Israel is a budding economic powerhouse, a mini Silicon Valley in the desert with groundbreaking medical, scientific, and high-tech breakthroughs, trend-setting throughout the world, doing incredible humanitarian work throughout the world. And the Arab nations see this, the Sunni Arab nations, and they say, wow, maybe we should finally get next to Israel here and put our heads together with the Israelis and see the true threat to peace in the region is the Iran axis. So we'll keep an eye on that as well in 2021. The continued growth of the Abraham Accords and more Muslim nations coming into the fold alongside Israel. So there you have it. The top three stories in 2020 are also the top three stories in 2021. The wars and rumors of wars, number one. Number two, Iran's nuclear program, and will the Biden administration re-enter that Iran nuclear deal? And number three, the Abraham Accords, a real positive in the region amid all the chaos and instability. Hey, thanks again to everyone for joining us for this SALT conference. This, to me, is the most important event that CUFI does every year. Of course, our Washington, D.C. summit is no slouch, but the SALT conference for me, because we are grooming young leaders here who are going to be at the forefront. In your generation, you will be at the forefront on this issue as mighty men and women of God in the years to come. So thank you guys so much. Enjoy this SALT conference. God bless you, and I hope to see you all again soon. Take care.
Thank you, Eric, for that very timely and insightful look at the top three stories about Israel in 2020. We're now going to shift gears and look at something very important to CUFI on campus, and that is our time of fellowship. Every year in person, we have the opportunity to encourage and pour into our students as Christians, and that is something we did not want to miss out on going virtual. So we have invited a very special friend of CUFI on campus, Mr. Sammy Lopez with CUFI's Israel Collective, to help us take a look and reflect on 2020 and have a fresh vision for 2021. I will hand it over to you, sir.
Hello everyone, this is Sammy Lopez with the Israel Collective, coming to you from San Antonio, Texas. Don't let the background fool you. I'm in San Antonio. A big God bless you to all those that are watching the 2021 SALT Conference. I wish we were there together, in person, high-fiving, hugging, no masks on. But until then, thank God for technology, that we get to do this at least virtually until we actually see each other once again, and hopefully very soon. I also want to give a big shout out to the CUFI on campus team for all the hard work that you guys have put into this conference to make this thing happen. Man, God bless you all. 2020 was a very unique year, very unpredictable. As a matter of fact, we also can see that 2021 is going to be just as unpredictable. As a matter of fact, some of you have had your ups and your downs last year, and it's almost as if it's happened again this year. But allow me to give you some words of hope and words of encouragement and remind you that the same God that was with us last year will be the same God that will be with us this year, and He will see us through, and His might and His power and His mercy will rain upon us. I know that for a fact because that's the kind of God that we serve. You know, we're living in a world now that so desperately needs love, so desperately needs hope. And I'm thankful that you and I, who are followers of Jesus, we have that hope living inside of us. And my prayer is that this year will be like no other year, that this is going to be the year that God uses us in ways that we would have never thought of or even imagined. And that's our hope for today, that although that are watching the SALT conference today, that we will say, God, I want you to use me in ways that I thought I would have never have been used, because he can, especially if you have a willing heart. Right now, more than ever, our country needs reconciliation. We need restoration. We need love. And this is a moment where we, as followers of Jesus, can do just that. As a matter of fact, we read throughout the scripture how Jesus went amongst the people and he healed people and he touched people and he restored the hope in people's lives. And the cool thing about it is that us being followers of Jesus, we get to do the same thing. And that's my prayer for us this year, is that we learn what it means to be like Jesus. So the scripture tells us that there was a man who had leprosy. As a matter of fact, we read it out of Matthew chapter 8. And what's incredible about this passage in the story is that this man with leprosy wanted Jesus to heal him. But here's what makes this story incredible. Jesus was a Jew. And so we know that there were certain mandates that they had concerning those who had leprosy. In other words, you wouldn't get close to them, much less touch them. But Jesus was unlike any other person. And here's what the story says about the man with leprosy who met Jesus. So Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, the Bible says this: when Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. And a leper came to him and bowed down before him and said, watch this, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Verse 3, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. Let me say that again. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing. Be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Now I want you to notice a key verse in this story. The story in and of itself is incredible, but there is a verse that makes this story even more incredible. And that's found in verse 3. The Bible says, and Jesus stretched out his hand, watch this, and touched him. In a time of mandate where you couldn't touch anyone, where you couldn't, especially those with leprosy, or much less get close to them, Jesus still touched him. Does it not sound like where we are today? Where we're encouraged to stay 6 feet from each other, right? Social distance. Wear your mask, clean your hands, don't touch anyone, don't hug, do a little, elbow bop, whatever it is. But isn't it crazy how it almost seems like that day? Of course, it's not leprosy. I'm just letting us know that it's incredible how we weren't supposed to touch, but yet Jesus touched. Jesus could have easily told the man with leprosy, he could have said, you're healed, and just left it as that, not touch him, not even get close to him, just shouted out, hey man, you're healed. But that's not how Jesus did it. Jesus touched him. And why do you think Jesus touched this man? It was more than just that Jesus touched him for Jesus' sake. Oh, no. Jesus touched the man with leprosy for the leper's sake. Could you imagine? This man with leprosy probably has not been touched in years. Not have had a human touch in years, much less a meaningful conversation with another human being due to the fact that he had leprosy. But yet Jesus loved this guy so much that he was willing to not only get close to him, not only talk to him, but to touch him. That only Jesus could do, right? So it's great because as we see this story, this is a time in our world where the world needs a human touch. The world needs a sincere person. The world needs to see what genuine, true love looks like. So here's my challenge to you, SALT Conference 2021. My challenge to you is, let's strive this year to be the hands of Jesus. Can you do that? And say, God, I want to be your hands. I want to show people what it means to love. I want to show people what it means to be a part of someone's life in spite of what they're going through. God, use me in a way that I thought I'll never, ever, ever be used. And allow me to be the hands of Jesus. So in order to be the hands of Jesus, let me give you 3 things that we must be willing to do if we truly want to be the hands of Jesus. Number 1, you must be willing, I must be willing, we must be willing to touch the sick. And when I say the sick, I'm not necessarily just talking about the physically sick. I'm talking about the emotionally sick, the spiritually sick, those that are going through a rough time. You know, if you were going to be the hands of Jesus, let's learn to touch those who are going through a rough time. You know, you never know what people are going through. You never know the mind of a man. You don't know it. Matter of fact, it's incredible because if you look at the statistics of 2020, the suicide rate spiked. Suicide left and right. And unfortunately, there may be some of you today watching may know of someone who committed suicide and took their life in 2020. Could you imagine 2021? Well, this is why we want to say, God, use me. Use me in such a way that I am the hands of Jesus and that I learn to grow a genuine love for those that are going through some tough times. Teach me to touch the sick just as you did. Look, if we want to be the hands of Jesus, we must be willing to touch the sick and to walk with them along the way. But number 2, if we're going to be the hands of Jesus and really want to be the hands of Jesus, we must be willing, watch this, to wash the feet of others. You know, one of the greatest ways, or shall I say, one of the greatest ways we can be leaders is by being a servant. Matter of fact, the Bible tells us that Christ did not come to the earth to be served, but he came to serve and to give of his life as a ransom to many. To be a servant is what it means to wash the feet of others. Hold others above yourself. In other words, I will put myself last for your sake. I will bless you before I bless myself. In other words, you probably are the one that needs the job, but you're going to say, no, I want you to have the job before I get the job. You may be the one that needs healing, but you're going to say, I want you to be healed before I'm healed. You may need a financial breakthrough, right? Got to pay some bills, got to pay off some student loans, but you're going to say, I pray for you to have the financial breakthrough and I'll come second. See, that's the beauty of what it means to be the hands of Jesus. Being the hands of Jesus saying, I'm going to put you above me. I'm going to wash your feet before I wash mine. That is what it means to be the hands of Jesus. God used me, right, in such a way, in a way that I thought I would never have been used. Some of the greatest leaders are the greatest servants. Is that you today? Can you challenge yourself today and say, God, I want to be a servant of others. I want to not only touch the sick and walk with them through their process, but Lord, I want to also wash the feet and serve others above myself. Some of the greatest leaders are the greatest servants. And some of the greatest servants are seen as the greatest leaders in the kingdom. And that's where it all boils down to. God, I want to be seen as a greatest servant before you. May I serve like you. May I touch like you. May I love like you and may I speak like you. But that is my prayer today. God, 2021 is unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we do know that you're in control and you want to use us for your glory. That's one of the greatest ways that you and I can ever be used of God. You must be willing to touch the sick. We must be willing to wash others' feet. But here's a third one. And this third one's a tough one, because this third one is going to see if we're really, truly willing to be the hands of Jesus. Now, I say this in this way. If you want to be the hand of Jesus, not only should we touch the sick and wash others' feet, but we also must be willing, watch this, to be crucified. Now let that sink in for a second. I'm not talking about literally crucified. I'm talking about pain will come. We must be willing to endure the pain that comes with blessing others, especially doing the work that we do. We are not only ministers of God, but we are also, watch this, supporters, and we stand with Israel. And the fact that you and I stand and support Israel, it's going to come with some hatred. Some of you may have already experienced that before already on your campuses. It's going to come with some dissension. It'll come with ridicule. It will come with people trying to censor you because you stand with Israel, because you support Israel. So it's going to come. When you stand for the things of God, it's going to come. When you stand for the Lord, it's going to come. And when you stand with Israel, it's going to come. In other words, if you stand for the things that God loves, censorship, dissension, ridicule, hatred, even persecution can come to you. But are you willing to endure it? Just as Jesus endured it for us, as what he did on the cross. But can we also in turn saying, Lord, as you endured the pain for us, may I also endure the pain for others, and be willing to stand for Zion's sake. I will not be silent. For Zion's sake, I will speak my voice, and for the kingdom's sake, I will stand for the Lord. That's the greatest challenge we can ever have today. And saying, God, I want to be your hands in the midst of ridicule, in the midst of dissension, in the midst of hatred, in the midst of censorship, in the midst of those that don't even want my help. God, I am still willing to be your hands while I touch the sick and walk them along the way. I am willing, God, to wash others' feet and hold others higher than I hold myself. But Lord, I'm also willing to endure the pain that will come with it. Because at the end, when it's all said and done, God, to you be the glory. I pray that today, that you take these thoughts in your mind, chew on them, apply them to your life, and say, God, for Zion's sake, I will not be silent. For Zion's sake, I will be the hands of Jesus. For Zion's sake, I will touch the sick. For Zion's sake, I will wash the feet of others. For Zion's sake, I will be willing to be crucified and take the pain that comes with it. For Zion's sake, I will not be silent. I will be the hands of Jesus. That's my prayer for you. Let's be the hands of Jesus. Let's bless others. We don't know what 2020 brings or 2021 brings, but we know what God brings. Life, love, mercy, hope, forgiveness, peace. He is our shalom. He is our Rapha, our healer. He is Jireh, our provider, and he is Nisi, our banner. Follow in his steps and allow God to do the most amazing things in your life this year. Salt 2021, may God bless you. CUFI Campus, may God bless you. And may his face shine down upon you. And let us leave this place being the hands of Jesus. God bless you all, and hopefully we'll see each other soon.
So now we're going to look a little bit at what is going on the U.S. college campus as it concerns Israel. We're going to take a look at Ivy Leagues, HBCUs, Christian universities, and look at our greatest obstacle, which is the anti-Israel BDS movement. So we're going to jump right in. Joining me now are our CUFI on-campus field coordinators. Justin, I'm going to start with you. When you look at Ivy League colleges across the nation, what are the trends that you see that are most troubling?
I'd really sum this up into three things that are going on Ivy Leagues. They are hate crimes, misinformation, I think is the most important, and recently BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. Jewish college students at Ivy Leagues have stated in surveys recently that they feel less safe and they feel like there's more pressure on them than ever recorded before in history. And just to give you an example of this, Jessica, about some hate crimes, there was recently at Harvard, a Jewish student group had purchased a menorah for Hanukkah to put on their campus, right? And unfortunately, people felt the need to vandalize it and to destroy it. And I mean, you also see swastikas being drawn on campus. This actually occurred at the same time nearby at Jewish fraternity houses. So that's one of the biggest struggles.
Okay, thank you. Hannah, let's take a look at HBCUs. Could you define what HBCUs are? And can you talk a little bit about the greatest challenges that we have?
Yeah, so HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. They're mostly concentrated in the South and some on the East Coast. And the greatest challenges that are facing HBCUs right now, there's kind of a rift on campus, on these different campuses. There's a population of Black students who are very connected and aware of their heritage, their historical connection to Israel and the Jewish people. And there's another population that has unfortunately been targeted and miseducated systematically over the last several decades. And they are on the opposite side. They view Israel as sort of a white colonial state, which is not true, but unfortunately the miseducation that's been going on, they're not aware of the actual facts of their history and their heritage. And so there's a little bit of a rift between those two communities, and there's kind of a fight to stand with Israel, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can see that. And Hannah is our HBCU coordinator specifically, as well as has a region. So I'm going to toss it to Cherith. When you look at the greatest challenges and the trends at Christian schools across our nation, what are the key elements that stand out?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. So the biggest thing is there is a lot of support on Christian campuses for the pro-Israel cause, and a lot of them take trips to Israel and really educated about in their classes. But one thing that we are seeing on Christian campuses is a lot of apathy, not considering Israel relevant, more focus on maybe evangelization rather than the actual cause of where their foundation is, which is from our salvation came from the Jews. And so understanding this is important, and also seeing replacement theology teaching a lot. I've had students tell me that a lot of times their classes, they're hearing that the church is more important than the Jews, and that the Jews are no longer relevant to God and is not necessarily something they need to focus on. So you know, these kinds of trends we're seeing on campus is a lot of misinformation and unfortunate, you know, sometimes taking scripture out of context to back these things up. So this is kind of what we're seeing. There is a lot of support, but on some campuses, we are seeing these kind of teachings come in.
Okay. I can see a trend across all of these demographics with people not finding why Israel is relevant. And that's the work that we do here at CUFI on campus, is helping people connect the dots and see why it's so important to support not only our greatest ally in the Middle East, but as Christians stand up for Israel and the Jewish people. So we're going to shift gears quickly, and we'll talk to Lydia. You're going to talk a little bit about the pushback across the United States on all of these campuses. We're even seeing it in high school. What would you say is our greatest challenge facing the U.S. college campuses today?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. That would be the BDS movement, which stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. And it's a group that basically, or movement made up of a lot of groups that want to see Israel eliminated from the world. But how they would do that would be to kind of annex it as a state, in the sense of making people think false things about it, to socially drive it into a pariah nation, whether that's false lies about it being a racist, genocidal, ethnic cleansing state. And unfortunately, when students hear this, of course they want to get on this social justice bandwagon. Who wouldn't? But they're being framed as all these lies. And recently a report came out that 99% of schools with one or more of these anti-Israel groups pushing this movement has faced anti-Semitism and increased anti-Semitism, compared to only 16% of schools that don't have these groups. There's almost no anti-Semitism there. Only 16% of schools without a group like this maybe has a little bit of anti-Semitism. So it's really showing that this movement is the backing cause of anti-Semitism today.
Okay. So we looked a little bit at what the trends are in these specific demographics. Let's talk a little bit about specific challenges and what is at stake. Let's mainly focus on what is at stake in the future if CUFI on campus and other pro-Israel organizations do not fight the battle to educate and activate our college students on behalf of the U.S.-Israel relationship. So Justin, I'll toss it to you again with Ivy Leagues. You touched on some of the challenges. Let's look at what is at stake if the future continues the way it is.
Well, many of the, our nation's top students are at Ivy Leagues. And so you have future leadership is at stake, honestly. You have many of the top political and business leaders around our nation that attend Ivy Leagues. And so just really, what is at stake is the future leadership of this nation standing with our greatest ally, Israel, in the Middle East.
It's very true. And similarly I'll actually toss it to Cherith to talk about what's at stake, since so many of our future religious leaders of the church are in Christian universities. So you shared a little bit about challenges. You can share more there if you'd like, but let's talk about what's at stake.
Absolutely. So yes, similar to what Justin was saying, a lot of our students at Christian universities want to become pastors, want to be Christian teachers and leaders and missionaries and things like that. And a lot of these people will be in educational positions. And so if they're learning replacement theology, and if they're learning that Israel is not a very relevant topic and that we don't need to focus on it anymore, then they're going to be bringing that into their congregations in the future, or into their classrooms, or any other place that they are in leadership. And so it's important that we teach them what the scripture says. We teach them and give them a solid foundation of where their faith is and why it's important, and the truth about Israel, so that they are not preaching misinformation or giving misinformation to future students down the road, and that we can continue as a nation and as a Christian body to follow the calling of God, which is what protecting and supporting Israel is to a Christian.
It is. That is exactly right, Cherith. And tomorrow, for our registration-only CUFI SALT content, we're going to have a guest speaker who's going to break down the biblical basis for supporting Israel. So if you want to learn more there, make sure you register and attend tomorrow's content. I'm going to toss it to Hannah. Let's chat a little bit more about the challenges at HBCUs and what is at stake long-term.
So long-term, what's at stake is kind of an exaggerated version of a little bit of what we saw in 2020, at least over the summer. There are a lot of, or there's a group of Black leaders, whether they're in entertainment or sports or some in politics, that were very publicly spewing out anti-Israel, anti-Semitic rhetoric, not fully aware of the weight of their words, thinking that it was some sort of pro-Black civil rights statement, but they were actually spewing out lies that have been debunked over decades, over generations, and this misinformation is very harmful. And thankfully, a lot of them were met with a lot of backlash, and they were made aware of what they were actually saying, and they recanted, and they vowed to educate themselves more. But what's at stake if we fail in this area is these things happening on a larger scale, meeting no backlash and having no recanting at all. In 2019, in New Jersey, we saw a terrorist attack on a Jewish deli, and the people behind this attack were actually part of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement, which is basically a group of Black Christians discovering their Hebrew roots of their faith. But it's a very twisted take on it, because it's the idea that authentic Jews can only be Black, and any white European Jews, they're quote unquote fake Jews. And Louis Farrakhan is someone who perpetuates that a lot in his rhetoric as well. So we see that this rhetoric always leads to violence in the end. So that's, in a nutshell, what's at stake if we fail in this area.
And can you share with our viewers, if you have a few names offhand, of some of the culture shifters and our national leaders who have come through HBCUs, which is an incredibly influential network of schools? Do you have any offhand that you can share?
Well, I know, like, civil rights leaders in general, like people like Martin Luther King, during his time went to HBCUs, but there are a lot of prominent, like, Black entertainment leaders, people like Spike Lee, film director, who graduated from HBCUs, and these institutions, they're still very high ranking, and so the students who graduate at the top of their class from these universities, they go on to lead in, the film industry. They go to professional sports. They're, big star NFL players. They even, make it to Congress and Senate. And so the information that they get at these institutions is very crucial, because they're leading a cultural movement when they graduate.
Wow, thank you so much. Let's shift to Lydia. We're going to again go big picture. What is at stake long term with the BDS movement and the anti-Israel rhetoric and lies that are on all of these campuses across the nation?
Yeah, I think simply put, it would be that this anti-Semitism is normal, and that people don't think it's anti-Semitism, that it's just instilled in people's minds that this is normal, and that this is how Jewish people are seen, or this is how Israel is seen, and there could be no defense to it, shall we say. We're even seeing a rise in faculty members pushing this propaganda, and that is scary, because then that gives legitimacy to these students in a sense, if you have faculty members pushing it as well. Maybe even faculty members who are teaching a math class and then suddenly go off on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with no, connection to the class at all. So unfortunately, that's what we're seeing, and that could be what the bad side would be if this continued.
Okay. And this is why CUFI on Campus exists. We have so much educational content. We have conferences like this virtual SALT conference, tomorrow's content, contact with your regional coordinator, educational materials like the Israel course, which we will talk more about tomorrow, that we can make available to our Christian students on campuses across this nation to ultimately change history. This is not written in stone, what we just talked about. We are making an impact with CUFI on campus. Our students are incredible, and God has a calling for Christians in the United States on this issue. Let's talk a little bit about what our students are doing in these demographics on these campuses and to combat the things we just talked about. So I'll begin with Justin. What's going on with CUFI on campus and Ivy Leagues?
Yeah, so first off, we've just been recruiting fellows for Ivy Leagues more than ever before. We're getting Christian students at Ivy Leagues trained on how to be successful at fighting anti-Semitism. And just to give you an example, at Harvard, shortly after the menorah was vandalized on campus, our Bonhoeffer fellow and our club was able to bring Holocaust survivor Irving Roth on campus, where we had a really well attended audience and students and faculty. So, when something like that happens, we're able to change the narrative on campus and to get the right information out there. And also, when BDS, the boycotts, divestments, and sanctions came to Columbia recently, CUFI campus had a student who joined in on the coalitions to speak up against this on campus.
So powerful. Our work on Ivy Leagues is crucial because our nation's future leaders are on these campuses, in these classrooms today. So we are moving forward with making sure that we are, in a sense, inoculating these campuses to the aggressive lies that are being taken place, as Lydia mentioned, sometimes from the lectern, from professors themselves. So we are moving forward with Ivy League, seeing incredible work there, and we will chat a little bit about Christian universities. Cherith, will you share a little bit about what we're doing there?
Yes, ma'am. So we are doing so many great things on Christian universities. One thing that is really neat is when you have an Israel supporting university that is Christian, there is a lot of support from the student base, and students can have really big groups and areas that they can join in. And so one thing that they are able to do then is reach out to other universities with students who are experiencing pushback and give them support, because they have so much support back in their university. They're able to outreach. And Colorado Christian University is a great example of this. We have students there who are passing the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism on their campus. And because they have so many resources, they are now reaching out to other universities in that area, like Colorado State and University of Colorado in Denver. And they're just working to unite and unify a lot of students in that area and giving support to those who are experiencing pushback and don't have as much backing as the ones that maybe some Christian schools do. So it's really neat to see the unification and the teamwork that they are doing on these campuses and the outreach that they're experiencing.
So incredible. I know the impact that we're having on Christian campuses is really making a difference with the over a decade existence of CUFI on campus and our ability to speak directly to Christians about Christian Zionism, to dispel misinformation about replacement theology, about the church's role in supporting Israel, uniquely from CUFI on campus through our campaigns, is shifting the tide. And we're seeing some of the top leaders in these Christian schools have become great friends of CUFI on campus. So praise God for that. And let's chat a little bit about HBCUs. Hannah, what's going on with CUFI on campus and HBCUs?
So the past year and a half, 2 years, we've seen a lot of my Bonhoeffer fellows have been coming from HBCUs. And when they get back to campus following their Israel trip, they're really, really connected to the issue. This past year before COVID hit, one of my Bonhoeffer fellows, Keturah, she goes to Albany State in Georgia. She held probably the biggest event in my region to that point. She hosted Holocaust survivor Irving Roth, and she collaborated with so many on-campus organizations and brought over 100 people to an auditorium to hear him speak. And other students, my Bonhoeffer Maria at St. Augustine's and Keitra at Jackson State, they're so dedicated to this issue, recruiting other students, and they understand their personal connection to it as Christians and as Black leaders of the future, and they're able to articulate to their fellow classmates, maybe even better than I could as a speaker coming and giving a presentation. They have this issue in their heart, and they're able to relate to their fellow classmates so much that they're pulling other people in and combating some hostility in some cases, but they never waver in their position, which is really great, I think.
Incredible. And the growth we've seen on HBCUs with CUFI on campus over the past several years is going to keep growing and keep spreading, and we will turn the tide with any misinformation of this specifically targeted demographic for anti-Israel sentiment. And we can chat now a little bit about what CUFI on campus is doing to combat BDS in general. So Lydia, will you share with us what CUFI campus is doing?
Sure. I'm really proud of our students because they are combating it from both fronts, whether that is on the defense or on the offense. So defensively, if maybe divestment legislation comes to campus, which would ask the school to pull all their funds from any companies that maybe are Israeli or that Israel profits from, then these students will go up and say how this is anti-Semitic, and they will defend it. And we've seen many times them stop these legislations from passing, these pieces of legislation from passing, because of their speeches and their heart and their passion behind it. And it's beautiful to see. And then they're also going on the offense with trying to pass something called the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. It is a new full encompassing definition, a working definition of anti-Semitism. 31 countries have adopted it, and our students are also passing this on their campuses. We've had major victories across the USA passing this on their campuses so that anti-Semitism is clearly defined, because we believe you can't fight something if you can't define something. So now that we know what anti-Semitism is, it raises awareness. It gives our students the ability to call it out when they see it. And it gives them the ability to bring something to light and maybe even to court in some sort way or another if anti-Semitism does happen on their college campuses.
That's amazing. And Lydia will be talking with some of these incredible student activists with CUFI on campus later tonight to break down that process of getting this crucial definition of anti-Semitism adopted on campuses in the US. So check that out in just a few minutes. But this has been a great time, just in a nutshell, of looking at what's going on across our country that concerns Israel on our US college campuses. We're going to shift gears and talk specifically about something a little bit more light, and we're going to be inviting our amazing tour guide, Ron, in Israel to be joining us and doing a demo of how to make the best cup of Israeli coffee you've ever had. So thank you guys so much for sharing this information, and we will toss it to you, Ron.
Thanks, Jessica. Now, before we start, I want to give a quick shout out to all you past students who are watching us right now, everybody who visited Israel with me or without. We love you all. I consider you as part of my family, and I'm sure that you're all experts in making your own coffee at home by now. Now, as Jessica mentioned, my name is Ron Lahad. I'm a tour guide here, and one of my favorite things to do and one of my hobbies is making coffee. Now, quick lesson. Coffee originated in Africa, was first discovered in Ethiopia, the Arabica bean. It was when a local sheikh was wandering and he saw extremely happy, energetic, and enthusiastic goats after they ate a specific berry, from a specific tree. Now that's how the coffee tree was discovered. Then merchants brought it through the Arabian lands to Syria. Syrian merchants brought it to Turkey. The Turkish were the first ones to establish coffee shops, coffee houses. The Turkish diplomats were the ones who brought it to Europe, specifically France, then England, and it was actually the Austrians after the Battle of Vienna that nicknamed it Turkish coffee. Now, Turkish coffee was made using a very light roast coffee beans. In Israel, we use a darker roast. Now, you can use any roast you want. You can buy the coffee ready in the supermarket, or you can go to your favorite coffee shop or coffee house or roasters and tell them, I want these kind of beans, this kind of roast. But the secret is extra, extra, extra fine grind. The grounds must be ground to a specific size, Turkish, or as some people use it as a 0 size, because otherwise they don't mix correctly. Now, I like to enjoy coffee outdoors. It's my favorite way. It's part of my passion. I also brew it at home. Actually, when you make it at home, some people say that the only reason you have a small burner on your stove is to make coffee in a pot like this. Now, this is mistakenly known as a finjan. This is not a finjan. The pot is known in Arabic either as a jizwa or ghaliyya. In Hebrew, it's just, kankan kafe, but a pot. This is a finjan. The mistake happened when people were invited for a cup of coffee, and they thought that they're invited to sit on the whole pot and drink and drink and drink, so they nicknamed it finjan. But you can use any pot you want. I just pre-boiled the water a little bit for you. Now, when we use these specific extra finely ground coffee beans, I like to take it away from the burner, because otherwise it will completely blow over. Ratio size, I like to use a pregnant spoon of coffee per cup, a little bit more even, and of course cup sizes vary. You can think about like espresso cups. I like to use these. Some use more. So let's start. 1, not that pregnant. 2, and a little bit more. 3. Now, this is because I'm also making for my wife. Now, crank up the heat, then bring it back. Now, some people you don't have to use a spoon, some people let it boil over completely and take it off a couple of times. They do it in kind of a routine. I don't like that. The reason is coffee exists within the beans as aromatic and different etheric oils. Now, when you let it boil over too much, you're actually losing the flavors. Now, the longer the boil, you're going to extract more caffeine, and you're going to lose the flavors. Bedouin coffee actually is known as bitter coffee. Café mar is when you let it simmer for a long time. This is the cream that you want to see right after. So I'm just stirring it a little bit. The coffee, of course, the water is boiling. If the water is not boiling, it's not going to extract the coffee, and you're gonna have the grounds and taste them as kind of muddy. Now, when you drink the cup, you don't drink all the way. Because the mud sedates in the bottom. You can also just use extra fine grounds with boiling water in your cup, but this is much, much better. Of course, this is the oldest way to make coffee. Today use espressos, drips, whatever. I like all of them. This coffee is amazing, but this is my favorite, and it's an amazing way to enjoy it with your friends. Now, toss it back to you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us from Israel, Ron. You were such an important part of the CUFI on Campus family. I know that the students that you've guided in years past on CUFI on Campus Bonhoeffer Fellowship trips are thrilled to see you tonight. And for those who are watching, Ron is the tour guide who will be giving us a virtual tour of the location in Jerusalem next month. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you're registered and attend tomorrow's SALT content. You will automatically receive an invitation to that tour. Our next video shows the impactful form of activism that CUFI on Campus engages in. We directly hit head on the lies that you hear in the media and on social media, in the college campus, from the lectern, and from friends and peers over coffee. And that lie that you will hear most often is that Israel is to blame for the Palestinian suffering. The Palestinian people are suffering, but the truth is they're suffering at the hands of their own leadership. If we want to move forward and help the Palestinian people, we need to be honest at who is oppressing them. This short activism video was filmed in Israel with Bonhoeffer Fellows at locations throughout Israel that tie into the topic they're addressing. For instance, it was actually Ron who helped us find locations that matched the subject. Be on the lookout for the line about incendiary balloons. Incendiary balloons are a form of terrorism where those who hate Israel and the Jewish people send a balloon, something linked with happiness and joy, over the border into Israel with something that will ignite crops and fields, personal property, and destroy homes. This is not only for destruction, but for terror. We filmed that short clip in a field that was actually destroyed by an incendiary balloon. A close friend of Ron's sent a photograph of the field destroyed earlier in the year. So check this video out. We ask you to share it, make this information known. It's also tied to a social media campaign and an on-campus campaign. If you are a student, you are watching, connect with your field coordinator on how you can get this information out. It is powerful, and is the way we can move forward with getting the truth about what is going on in the region out. Let's roll the film.
Israel stands for peace, equality, and democracy, hope, innovation, and diversity.
Freedom of religion and freedom of thought. Yet still, Israel's very existence is fought.
But Palestinian leadership, this message is for you. Extending your hand in peace is long overdue.
5 times you've said no to a state of your own, refusing to acknowledge that the Jewish people have always called this land home.
5 times you have denied the next Palestinian generation the establishment of a Palestinian nation.
In pursuit of peace, Israel has made countless concessions.
You say you want peace, but your actions are confessions.
You live in mansions, but your people never see a dime. Then you offer them money to commit crime.
You pay your own people to murder Jews. You send Palestinian children to dig tear tunnels, but that never makes the news.
Palestinian leadership, we are calling on you to stop.
To stop using your own children as political tools. To stop using aid to fund terrorism, but to build hospitals and schools.
Stop using children as human shields. Stop launching rockets from UN buildings, hospitals, and open fields.
Stop the incitement of children through school books and Saturday morning cartoons. Stop destroying Israeli homes and crops with incendiary balloons.
Palestinian leadership, we are calling on you. Stop lying to Palestinian moms that their children's future is found through bombs.
Palestinian leadership, we are calling on you to love your own people more than you hate the Jews.
Because the whole world is watching, and peace is waiting on you.
Huge thank you to our Bonhoeffer Fellows who participated in this important project. Tomorrow, we are devoting an entire session on Palestinian human rights. When it comes to the college campus, we not only face misinformation and lies, we also combat hate. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. It didn't quarantine in 2020. It didn't obey a stay-at-home order. If anything, it spread, and it infected families, campuses, and social media. But CUFI on campus is taking a proactive approach. We've just completed our first ever full feature film against anti-Semitism, and it is called Never Again. Follow the link in the description below this screen if you want to access this incredible film. Check it out.
It all begins with words. Uttered by individuals, repeated by others, and became a philosophy, an ideology.
When you become anything without realizing that it's happening, it's called brainwash.
I hated America. The Jews were the reason for all the evil in the world.
This we must not allow to happen again.
We're now going to talk about what CUFI on campus is doing specifically to combat anti-Semitism. I'm now going to hand it over to Lydia Yazzie, our BDS Task Force Coordinator, for this conversation. Lydia, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Jessica, for talking about the importance of anti-Semitism and how we need to combat that and how, unfortunately, it is on the rise. And we have seen this clearly in our time on campuses. You know, anti-Semitism is on the rise, whether it's swastikas being drawn multiple times on campuses or Jewish fraternity homes, to maybe the insane amount of bullying and outright hatred being called upon the Jewish people on social media, to Jewish students being bullied, whether physically or verbally on college campuses. And we're seeing it time and time again. But this is why CUFI on campus is here. We are pushing back and we are fighting back. And the best way that we are doing that is in the form of something called the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. It stands for the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance Act. I am joined in this session, as you can see, by Corey, Casey, Grant, Kira, and Emily, who are incredible CUFI on campus students who are pushing back by using this definition of anti-Semitism. We're going to speak with them briefly and quickly about that. Corey, Casey, Kira, Emily, Grant, they have all either passed or are currently trying to pass and adopt this form of definition of anti-Semitism on their campus. This definition not only has been adopted by the United States, but actually 31 other countries. And it is vital because we believe that you cannot fight what you cannot define. But now that we have a definition, we can push things forward on campus. I'm going to read to you the definition quickly so you know what we're talking about. It says, quote, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community, institutions, and religious facilities. It goes on then to actually list 11 examples of what this could look like. Maybe, you know, denying the Holocaust, or actually calling for, or maybe aiding, justifying the killing or harming of Jews, to maybe perpetuating these stereotypical allegations that demonize and dehumanize Jewish people, such as maybe Jewish people control the media, or outright lies like that. So this is why CUFI on campus is here, to combat this anti-Semitism, to define it, and we can push this fight forward. So I'm gonna actually toss it to Kira first. You go to the University of New Mexico. I know, unfortunately, you have experienced a lot of anti-Semitism and or you've seen it firsthand. Can you touch briefly on what that looks like and how you've experienced that?
So at my university, one day on Central Campus, I was walking with a friend of mine who's Jewish when a student at Student Justice for Palestine came up to her with a piece of paper, and on this piece of paper, it had a picture of Anne Frank on it, and it had a slash through Anne Frank's illustration, and underneath it, it said, "Free Palestine and boycott Israel." And my friend was just very, very shocked. She didn't know what to do, and she felt very embarrassed and uncomfortable. And then I was at a mock United Nations meeting with my friend as well, when we went around the table talking about our favorite countries besides the United States. So I said Israel and France, and the president of mock United Nations basically said that he didn't like the symbolism of the Israeli flag. He said that it represented Zionism, and then he said that Zionism was a racist ideology. And then another girl said, in the class, when we were going around, she said that her favorite flag was the Palestinian flag, and she hoped that Israel would burn in awful death. So those are a few of the experiences that I've had.
Wow, that is just insane that that is actually being perpetrated. But I know that you are in the works of trying to start to pass this legislation. And thank you, Kira, for doing that, for standing up against that, because this is what it will actually pass. I know too, you did have a recent victory though, even though you haven't passed IRA yet, about the book Mein Kampf. Can you talk about that story real briefly?
Yeah, so the Student Justice for Palestine chapter at my university was tabling on campus, and they were selling copies of Mein Kampf. And I was actually walking in my bookstore one day when I saw like 2 copies on the shelves, and they were selling Mein Kampf. So I decided to protest that happening, because that shouldn't be sold in a university bookstore. And I basically told workers at the bookstore that I wouldn't leave until they took the copies off the shelves. And finally, they did. They took the copies off.
That is amazing. And I know you've told me that they have stayed off the shelf. So congratulations, Kira. And for the students back watching this, you know that even if you can't pass the IHRA definition right away, you can still do other forms of activism just like that. So thank you, Kira, for your example. And for the first example of passing this legislation, Corey, I wanted to toss it to you. You go to Florida State University. I know you had a long fight to get this passed. It was not an easy road. There were hours of debate on Zoom. There were anti-Israel groups that ganged up trying to either not pass this legislation or trying to water down the definition, just really put this on for a long time. But you, luckily, as being part of student government, helped to get this passed. Can you touch on that and how you helped in that way?
Yes, of course. And thank you, Lydia, for the question and for having me on. I think really, first and foremost, it was beneficial for me being in student government because I was able to actually sponsor the bill and help push it through, help see it through. You know, I wasn't reliant on a student senator being willing to stick their neck out for it, because there were a lot of reluctant people. There were people there that didn't want to really stir the pot, that didn't want to sort of face the backlash that would come with that. So being in student government really gave me the chance to do that myself, you know, to take the initiative and to do that. And I was actually prompted to do it by a friend of mine who was Jewish, a former senator. She was no longer a senator, but we're still good friends. And she reached out to me about it. She was really concerned about events that had taken place. And so that was actually my first introduction to the IHRA definition. And I said, of course I'll do it. I'd be happy to do it. But on top of that, I think it's really important being in student government because you build those relationships with people. You know, it's sort of lobbying your student government, I guess, is great. And trust me, that can go a long way. But speaking from experience, when something like that is going down, I think I must have gotten over 3 dozen emails, both in pro and con, within the week that this was happening. So, you know, an email is one thing, but actually having that relationship with senators, building that rapport with them, having them knowing where you're coming from, so that them understanding your real motives for doing this. That's you can't replace that. That's absolutely invaluable. And so really those are the most important reasons. And that's why I would urge everyone who's trying to get this passed and trying to take up this activism on campus to get involved in student government as early as you can and as often as you can.
That is so good. And I know that you did have a strong victory. Not only did you get it passed, but your school went on to also see and learn from you. Can you just share a little bit of that as well?
Yes, absolutely. So like you said, after the hours and hours of debate, we did pass the resolution unamended as it was with the full IHRA definition. It was a great victory and we were really happy to do it. But then within the week after we did that, I believe our university felt that it was in solid enough footing to basically pass the resolution themselves at the administrative, not the resolution, but the definition themselves at an administrative level. Within the week, we got an email saying that the university had adopted the IHRA definition as well, which was really, really just so much better than we could have even hoped for.
That is incredible, Corey. And I know that I think you told me previously they even started a task force against anti-Semitism. And that's incredible. And again, for those of you watching, this is exactly what you can do and the power you can have on student government by being able to maybe be the one to present this in the first place, to be that block that somebody can have knowing they're on your side to present pro-Israel or legislation like that against anti-Semitism. So thank you, Corey, for your example. And now I know you had a tough run of it, but I'm going to toss it to Grant here, who luckily had a little bit of an easier run. I don't want anyone to be intimidated. This is always a hard process. Grant, you passed this unanimously on your campus, and you also were in student government, and you just got elected as the student body president. Congratulations. So can you talk a little bit about how that's helping you to enable this to move forward? And also, you had some great tips about how you talk to others about writing this legislation to maybe share with us too.
Of course. So starting out, when first looking at this, the IHRA definition, I was able to actually take it to the dean and look at Union University's current Title IX provisions when it comes to acts of racism. And we were able to see specifically where Union was currently failing in its protection of Jewish students specifically, and to see how passing this resolution could really help the university prepare for acts of anti-Semitism if they were to occur on campus, though thankfully we have had none. So with passing the resolution, being involved in student government, not only was I able to actually present the resolution and write it, but also now being SGA president, I'm able to really help in its implementation. So that way, now that it's passed and it's working its way through administration, I can help see and fill in the gaps with exactly how it's going to be presented.
So good. Yes. I love that you were preemptive in your approach. You knew what you wanted to pass, but you made sure to go by the standards, what was already there, really getting that advice from others. That's so good. Really goes with the book of Proverbs too. You had that wisdom. and I'm so glad that you passed it too, Grant. Actually, you're the first one I know as a sole CUFI chapter to pass this through. So congratulations on that. And Emily, I'm going to toss it to you. Right after Grant passed it, you passed it as well at Houston Baptist University. And I know you both, even though they're both pro-Israel schools, you really wanted to do this as a preemptive manner. And I love, though, how you formed your legislation around the pillars of HBU and what you stand for. And you did incredible research that put together this PowerPoint that actually now we can use to help everybody trying to pass this. Can you kind of touch on both of those things?
Yes, thank you, Lydia. So one of the big things we wanted to do was to research what our university stands for and the overall missions that it tries to implement. So from that, we really looked at the entire document, and we were able to highlight and look at the many areas where H strives to connect with our outside community and to also embrace diversity. And as Houston has a huge Orthodox Jewish community here, and so we knew this is a perfect way to answer the why questions. And so creating a PowerPoint was a great way to do that. Not only did it keep my thoughts on track, but it also implemented statistics, what CUFI was and why definition was so important. And I was able to include other universities and what their experience was passing this. And so overall, I would highly recommend to use a PowerPoint, because not only will it help you, but it will also help the other SGAers understand the facts behind it.
Yes, thank you, Emily. And I love how you included research directly from your city, your campus, the acts of Semitism and percentage that have either increased, decreased, how much, and you made it very personal in there. And thank you for creating this PowerPoint that can be a template now for others to use as well. And of course, for Corey, Emily, and Grant in general, you guys all created great templates of legislation for others to use too. So thank you. And Casey, I want to toss it to you last of all. You are doing an incredible job in the process of passing this through. But again, Colorado Christian is a very pro-Israel school. You know it will get passed. So you thought ahead and you want to make your city, Denver in general, pro-Israel. Can you talk about how you're doing that and helping push that forward?
Definitely, yeah. I'm very blessed to be able to go to a university that is encouraging me in this and is already looking ahead, and we know that it'll be passed, if not the first time, the second time that it goes through. But essentially what I want to be is a preemptive strike against anti-Semitism here in Denver and in Colorado, and sort of make an impact, not just on my campus, but on local campuses, to give the Jewish community somewhere that they feel safe and protected, to be able to not only practice their religion, but also just exist as people and as children of God. I think it's really important to have a group of people to stand with Israel.
So good. Thank you, Casey. Yes, and thank you for working with others in your community to pass this as well on their campuses. That is so essential to have someone who has already gone before help them in the process, and knowing they have someone who's with them in it all. So I just want to say thank you one more time to all of you, Corey, Casey, Emily, Kira, and Grant. You all are incredible advocates. Thank you for your example. And I want to encourage everyone at home that, you know, we also as a group meet to discuss how we can push this forward, to encourage one another. If you would like to pass this on your campus, it is one of the best ways you can leave a legacy, like Bonhoeffer did. Be a Bonhoeffer, leave a legacy on your campus that not only helps you and your generation, but generations to come. So talk to your coordinators if that's something you want to do. We would love to prioritize that with your semester plans, and we'll help you every step of the way. And I'll toss it back to you, Jessica, for the rest of our programming.
Thank you so much, Lydia. And thank you so much to our amazing student activists. You are not only making a difference now, you are making a difference for the future and leaving a legacy. We've had thousands of students go through the CUFI on Campus program. We've educated them, we've equipped them, we've given them the tools that they need to speak out for Israel and the Jewish people. And one of the key ways we do this is with our Bonhoeffer Fellowship. Our Bonhoeffer Fellowship is based on the life and activism of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a German pastor and theologian who stood against Hitler and his Nazi regime. And we base this fellowship on his character and the fact that he put his faith to action and did something. A lot of the students who were just in that video are CUFI on Campus Bonhoeffer Fellows. If you want to learn more about it, check out our website and also check out this video.
Everybody says that the Bible comes alive really whenever you're in Israel, and it's so true.
Just this place as a whole is a representation, a physical representation of the faithfulness of God.
They care about everyone here, and Israel's so diverse.
I can take that back to my campus. Just actually really dive deeper.
Seeing it on TV is completely different than seeing it firsthand.
Especially my second time to Israel, I was already able to talk to friends the first time I came. I feel 10 times more passionate about it.
Being here has been incredible. We're seeing where Jesus walked, where he did his ministry, where he did everything.
It's encouraged me, made me even more confident, being here and seeing and knowing, hey, I know we've read about this and you read about this, but I've actually seen it.
now in the nation of Israel that all the promises that people would return to their land, it's coming true, and we're able to see that today. We are reading the Word of God that is alive.
I love that video. I can't wait to go back to Israel. And if we have any Bonhoeffer Fellows of class of 2021 who are watching, God willing, we'll be together in Israel this summer. If you are new to CUFI on campus, if you are one of the high school students who are watching tonight, if you are freshmen in college who are watching tonight, if you were invited by a friend who's passionate about supporting Israel, we want to get you connected. We want you to become part of the CUFI on campus family. We're here for you. We pray with you. We equip you. We educate you. We support you. We help you brainstorm how to make an impact on your campus for Israel and the Jewish people. No matter what, we have a campaign or an initiative to address it. So tomorrow, for our registration-only content, we'll go in depth with topics that you'll hear on your college campus. And we'll go in depth with ways that you can be active, including regional breakout sessions with your fantastic field coordinators. Speaking of, I will toss it to 3 of our field coordinators to wrap up the evening with a few more thoughts, and I will see you tomorrow.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our first day of our Student Advocacy and Leadership Training Conference, this time virtual. We're so happy you could join us. A couple things to keep in mind as we wrap up. 1, if you want to stay involved with CUFI on campus beyond this conference, we have a lot of resources for you. You can go to CUFIoncampus.org and take advantage of all the resources we have on that page. You can connect with your field coordinator. So go on our map and figure out what state falls under which coordinator. Connect with us. We'll keep you involved. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. Keep connected with us that way because we use that as entertainment, education, current events, things like that. So keep connected with us on that. And we have something called the Israel course, where every week through the school year, we go through a CUFI original curriculum, week by week, lesson by lesson, and we kind of uncover the biblical basis for supporting Israel, Israel's history, Israel's culture, and how you as a Christian advocate are supposed to stand up for Israel. So keep up with those things, and I'll toss it to Cherith.
Hey guys, so glad you're here coming and seeing about Israel with us. It's amazing. Ways you can stay learning and all these resources that you want to take part of are, one of them is the CUFI Daily Briefing. You can sign up on our website at CUFI.org. It has so much information right to your inbox every morning with the most relevant information about Israel of the day. So definitely check that out. We have the weekly Israel course, like Hannah said. Definitely be a part of that. Talk to your coordinator, be a part of it, because it goes in an in-depth historical look about why we support Israel and why they still matter today. We have, and that's actually starting next month, so definitely get involved. We have The Watchmen on TBN and Amazon Prime. Great video and TV series for your meetings and any events you might want to have, and for your own personal education. The CUFI podcast, the Israel Collective podcast, and the CUFI podcast, they're both incredible resources for you to listen to when you're running, when you're on campus, when you're walking back and forth. Just another educational resource that you can have in your tool belt. We've also got the CUFI on Campus newsletter. Look at that for more information on events and upcoming things that you don't want to be missing out on. We have the CUFI Coffee Break and the Word of the Week, both devotionals and more learning materials for your campus's meetings and other things that you can be a part of. So we have tons of information. Check it out on our website at CUFIoncampus.org or CUFI.org, or reach out to one of us to stay more involved. And I'll toss it to Justin to wrap us up.
Kicking it off tomorrow, we're going to have the biblical basis for support of Israel. Ari Morgenstern, our communications director, is going to be giving us a Middle Eastern update. And there's so many other crucial Israel topics that you don't want to miss. Also, as a incentive for attending this conference, we're going to be giving you an exclusive tour of Israel with Israeli tour guide Ron Lahad. Also, you can win this t-shirt during our Clarity Hour challenge, where we're going to be challenging you on all the different topics we've talked about here at SALT. And lastly, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart and everyone else at CUFI on campus, thank you so much for attending this conference. It really means the world. We put so much hard work into this. Praise God for helping it come all together. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful evening.